Hello, and welcome to today's discussion on transforming the employee experience with a zero trust strategy. My name is Ann Johnson, and I'm one of the corporate vice presidents for the security, compliance, and identity business at Microsoft. I love my job because not only do I oversee Microsoft's long-term investment and our partnership strategies for these areas, I also get to work with my friends and colleagues like Sue Bohn, who is joining me today.
Thank you, Ann. I'm delighted to join you today. If my memory serves right, the last time we hung out together in person, we were buying jelly beans at the Detroit airport on a layover. Times have changed. So I hope this talk really allows our customers and partners to have more conversations with us. And so let me just explain a little bit more about what I do at Microsoft, because I love my job too. So I run the customer and partner success team for identity. My team is part of engineering, and our job is to really cut the distance between our customers and partners and the engineering team so that we can work at what I call cloud speed. Now, this connection is extremely powerful, and it's even been more relevant when speed has really mattered during the pandemic.
That's a great story too, Sue. And the thing I remember about the jelly beans in the Detroit airport is I was just learning to play the piano, and I'm still not super accomplished, but I'm getting there. But I learned how accomplished you are being a pianist, and I was really impressed. And I was like, wow, okay, I'm going to catch up. So I'm still working on it.
Good. Well, I have a learning mindset, and I'm now learning accordion. So I don't know if that's going to be, a popular instrument, but certainly is an interesting one. One my father used to play.
And it sounds like it's fun, right? I think
Yes.
At this time of the pandemic, we've all had to find some things that are just interesting as we're, in our homes a lot more, which really kind of lends to the topic today, right? We've been hearing from our customers and our partners about how they've had to change the way they work, whether it was COVID or even the recent cyber attacks. When you have all of these folks going home, it really allows us to navigate through this unprecedented circumstances we have now. We change fundamentally the way people work, but we have to maintain business continuity.
That's absolutely right. And the COVID-19 pandemic and the pervasiveness of remote work really means that zero trust has become a business imperative. Now, some of my customers, they were able to, they'd been further along in their move to the cloud already. So they were just using a new set of configurations in Azure Active Directory in order to enable remote work. Others went on a bit of a crash course, and so in a matter of days or a few weeks had to enable remote work for everyone in their company. So we think of identity as really the foundation of zero trust. And we describe zero trust as having 6 elements. So it has identities, apps, devices, infrastructure, networks, data, a lot of moving parts. But identity is really the front door, and it's the only part that really connects all these security solutions for end-to-end visibility. Or said another way, I think of Azure Active Directory as really the heart of the zero trust strategy, since it's in the path of every access request.
This is a great place for us to start the discussion. I mean, security threats have become more daunting, right? Organizations are going to be remaining, for at least the short term and medium term in a remote work environment. And these organizations have to reach a state where their core operations and their services are not going to be disrupted by all these global changes and all these attacks around us. Speaking with our customers globally, we also know that they are not fully prepared to withstand a major cyber event. So as we think about zero trust, we have to think about operational resilience and that ability to sustain the business operations in the event of any major cyber event or any type of event, including a cyber attack. So can we talk a little bit about how organizations have transformed literally almost overnight? Last year, all of our folks went home, right? Let's bring all these pieces together. And I know that you actually have an excellent example of how these pieces have come together for one of our customers.
Yes. So let me talk about Johnson Controls. They're the world's largest portfolio of building products and technologies. They make buildings smarter with the full range of solutions, digital and otherwise. So when COVID-19 began to spread, they transitioned all of their workers to work from home to keep them safe. And this essentially overwhelmed their VPN. Connection speed slowed. It was difficult for employees to connect to on-premise apps. And in some cases, they really couldn't even connect at all. So to address this, Johnson Controls deployed an integration between Azure Active Directory and Zscaler so that all 50,000 employees could work remotely at the same time. They used Azure Active Directory's conditional access policy engine to validate the identities and then to detect if a user was inside or outside the network and prompt the user appropriately when they logged in. Now, as I mentioned, when COVID hit, their VPN solution could not scale. And so they didn't want to have the delay of adding additional VPN hardware. So they went with a cloud solution from Zscaler so that they didn't have to rely on physical or virtual appliances. And it was much faster and easier to stand up. So that way they could connect their on-premise apps without exposing them to the internet, which was more secure, and without an additional sign-on.
So, you know what, Sue, that's a really great example of how customers leveraged identity as their core control plane, how they didn't add complexity, right? But they were trying to bring applications online, and then how we can work with a partner like a Zscaler, and those SaaS applications can make the difference in the ability for our customers and their employees to adjust securely to the new normal and maintain productivity of the end user.
One of the most important applications to connect to Azure Active Directory is your HR system. Onboarding new employees can be a real challenge when everything goes remote. New employees can't just come into the office and pick up their credentials and pick up their corporate managed device. These operations now have to happen remotely and at scale. So connecting your HR system with Azure AD means that you automate the provisioning and deprovisioning of users. Many of our customers use cloud HR solutions like Workday and SuccessFactors, but there's many other HR systems in use today. So we've made a partnership with Aquera, which provides robust integrations to like 24 different HR systems, both on-premise and in the clouds. So now once integrated, there's a lot of value for the automatic flow of employee information from HR into AAD, and then can even go further and be integrated with a digital workflow system like ServiceNow, so they can fully automate the onboarding process. So HR, IT, the hiring manager can all be assigned tasks so that the employee has the apps they need and everything they need to be productive on day one. So now the onboarding process is repeatable, efficient, and entirely remote.
You know, I think that's incredibly important. And I think we're going to talk more, I know, about Azure Active Directory, but AAD, which we call Azure Active Directory, that identity provisioning platform that enables your core business applications, including human resources. It's not just an IT identity store, it's actually a business enabler. And it allows us to address the modern challenges that our customers are facing and deliver experiences that will actually boost both productivity and boost security for an enterprise. But let's talk just a little bit deeper right now about zero trust, because it's a word, you know, it's a phrase, it's a buzz phrase that's used throughout the industry, and I think we want to spend some time defining it a little bit. So I want to start by saying that zero trust is actually a security mindset. We know that organizations who adapt more quickly are those who actually have adopted or are adopting a zero trust philosophy. So organizations that were traditionally relying on things like security, you know, firewalls and traditional security methods, we know that as we've moved to this remote world, it's impacted their productivity and they've been more susceptible to threats, and they're less able to meet the needs of this newly remote workforce. You know, in the past, we assumed everything was safe behind the corporate firewall. It hasn't been that way for a while. So with zero trust, we adhere to 3 simple principles, and we're going to talk about each of them. First, verify explicitly. Second, use least privileged access. And third, assume breach. We apply these principles to every aspect of a digital estate, and it's really important to do that. Everyone that I've talked to, whether they know it or not, is on a zero trust journey, but it's important to understand that that journey is the holistic part of your environment. So starting with verify explicitly, we mean validating any access request in its full context. This talks about the user account, the device, the network, the application, the data being accessed, etc. And it starts with something I talk about frequently, using strong user authentication. Multi-factor authentication for 100% of the people who access your environment 100% of the time. We need to make an effort to move away from passwords. We also want to move away from SMS and voice calls as authentication factors, and we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Bad actors are getting more sophisticated all the time, and they've found a number of ways to exploit publicly switched phone networks that SMS and voice call uses, as well as some social engineering methods that get these codes from users directly. For most users on mobile applications, we believe that the right answer is passwordless authentication with an app-based authentication like Microsoft Authenticator or a phishing-resistant hardware key. We work with a number of partners, and I'd like to showcase an example from our partner, Yubico. The YubiKey supports multiple security protocols and form factors to provide strong authentication on any device across on-prem and cloud environments. A single YubiKey can be used as MFA or a smart card in traditional systems, as well as a FIDO2 security key in Azure. So it's a future-proof investment that serves as a bridge to passwordless. YubiKey has developed a biometric key, the YubiKey Bio, that is currently in preview for our FIDO2 passwordless customers. Anne, do you have yours?
Sue, I do have a YubiKey, and it's the newer model, so you can see that it has the biometric there on the center of it. I've been testing it, putting it through some of the use cases and having some fun with it.
So one of our customers, Keep Mode Homes, which is a UK-based home builder, is testing the YubiKey and using the YubiKeys. They're a cool company. Their motto is they don't build houses, they build homes. And they wanted to modernize their whole solution and reduce risk, and also make sure that it was easy for their workforce to use, especially on the job site. So they chose the YubiKey and Windows Hello for Business. And now they feel like they've been able to achieve single sign-on with multi-factor authentication with a frictionless user experience.
And I think it's really important that whenever we talk about security and we talk about security controls and we talk about authentication, we talk about frictionless, right? One of the barriers to strong authentication historically has been a lot of user friction. We're past that point in time. These are, when you think about Windows Hello for Business, you think about the YubiKeys, you think about our other partnerships. We're really getting to the point where we can secure folks. We can use multi-factor authentication for 100% of the users 100% of the time, and we can do it in a frictionless way. So thank you, Sue. I want to talk about the next concept within Zero Trust, which is least privileged access. This means that we do grant access, but we grant it at the minimal level of access the user needs to complete a specific task, and only for the amount of time that the user needs it. And this is done dynamically. It's not something the user has to choose. So, think for an example, you let somebody into your building, but only during certain work hours, and you don't let them get into every part of the building. Maybe you have a lab or a research facility. It's the same concept when you think about how we do it within Zero Trust, but we're doing it, virtually, technologically versus physically letting someone in the building. This identity governance is going to allow you to balance your organization's need for security, but we also want to give the employees the right productivity and the right processes and the right visibility. And it provides you with the ability to audit, to log, and to monitor that user experience, so you are balancing security and productivity. Provides you with the capabilities to ensure that you have the right people, they have the right access to the right device, to the right data, to the right applications at the right time, and they have the minimal access they need to do their job, which helps with your security posture and defending against bad actors who are in your environment.
You are so right, Anne. And I have a great example of this, which is Microsoft DigiGirls. This started out as a volunteer project about 20 years ago, and it's grown to be a worldwide program that helps girls understand what it would be like to have a job in STEM. And so they run these camps and workshops. Think of the Microsoft employees as the talent that gives and presents the content, and then they use a host of vendors and day workers to really manage the event logistics. So because these girls are minors, it's really imperative that privacy is maintained. So these local vendors might only work one event and then may move on. And so we want to make sure that they only see the information that they need in order to run the event. So the DigiGirls CRM system is built on Dynamics 365 marketing and uses Azure Active Directory for entitlement management and identity governance. So AAD provides the vendors a robust credential that can be rapidly created and then automatically offboarded after the event. They're only given the information they need and no PII information about the girls. So they can also onboard other apps they might need, like Box and Salesforce. So all these processes are really straightforward, and they don't put any sensitive data at risk.
That's an incredible application, thinking about the privacy, right, of the audience they serve, and that ability to grant access, but also make sure they can be productive. The last principle of Zero Trust is assume breach. As an industry, we have been talking like this for years, right? That you should assume that you were breached and someone is in your environment. Doing so, then, you need to apply techniques such as microsegmentation to make sure if they are in your environment, you can contain where they are. You also need to apply real-time analytics to detect attacks much more quickly. And all systems should be ready to detect and remediate any attacks. You should design your security infrastructure to minimize what we call your blast radius. So if you do have an attack, it only hits a certain small set of your devices or your users or your applications. The majority of organizations are operating right now in a hybrid environment. They have some or most of their infrastructure is still on premise. They have some that they have moved to the cloud, and they have released resources they rely on in both places. Assuming breach means that you're preparing in advance to detect, mitigate, and remediate threats and attacks. Connecting everything together gives you the most visibility and the best options for managing your security policies, for governing access to your resources and data. And when we talk about it today, we're thinking about identity. Identity is how you connect everything into a single control plane. You want to connect all applications from your SaaS applications to your on-premises applications and your cloud resources to a single cloud identity service that will not only give your users a better single sign-on experience, but it also is going to improve your security and improve your visibility. Although there is this continuing shift to migrate workloads to the cloud and to develop new cloud-native SaaS applications, the majority of an organization's mission-critical applications will likely continue to reside on-premises for the foreseeable future. This pandemic, however, and the push that we had to work from home has led to the need for remote access to all company applications, including those that are still in that on-prem environment. And we want people to be able to access from any device. So when exposing these applications to the internet, it's imperative that you make sure that your company data remains protected and only the right users get access to the right resources with the least privilege at the right time. This is all part of your assumed breach posture.
And I have a great example of that. One of my customers, Durham County from North Carolina, fell victim to a pervasive ransomware attack last March. They have 300,000 citizens, and they have 3 universities they support. And they had a response system, luckily, that detected the attack right away. So thankfully, there was no money exchanged, there was no data lost, but they had to rebuild 80 servers and hundreds of PCs, which means they had to enlist their vendors, state resources, and even the National Guard. So then they went about a task to really modernize their security by implementing Azure Active Directory, turning on multi-factor authentication, and using our conditional access policy engine for what you mentioned, that right information to the right person from the right location at the right time, and also our privileged identity management to ensure that their IT admins were protected as well. You know, as a cloud provider, we just love for everyone to move to the cloud. But customers can't move that fast, and like you said, many things will stay on-prem. So we really need to meet them where they are. And adding modern security is really necessary for their existing app portfolio. And for the case of Durham County, their tax and social services departments had specialized and tailored apps that ran on-prem, and they really needed that way to enable the single sign-on and MFA for those applications. So they chose to use our partner solution called F5 to connect all of these applications so they would have this secure access path with Azure Active Directory. And they made a vow of never again, and they continue to strengthen their security posture, which I think makes them a great example of really what it means to assume breach.
That is a great example, and also using a partner and showing how heterogeneous Microsoft is in really having the security ecosystem to support our customers on that security and productivity journey. So in closing for me, let me just talk about some steps you can take to implement, now to improve and better protect your employees' experience. First, adopt a zero trust security strategy to protect against attacks and identity compromise. Second, connect all of your apps to a cloud identity system like Azure Active Directory to give employees secure access from anywhere. Third, turn on and enable and use multi-factor authentication 100% of the time for 100% of the people who are accessing your environment, whether they're employees, whether they're contractors, whether they're partners. Fourth, Pilot passwordless authentication so you actually can give people the most seamless and secure way to sign in.
Be sure to check out the links in the notes below for each of these steps so you can learn how to get started. I recommend starting with aka.ms/zerotrust.
So, Sue, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to talk to you. I'm hoping we can, share jelly beans and maybe even a little bit of a band in the future. But I want to thank the audience too for joining us for this discussion on transforming the employee experience using a zero trust strategy. I hope we provide some clarity to that strategy so it's not just a buzz phrase for you. You really got some meaning and some good customer examples who are using it. And make sure, as Sue said, you visit our Microsoft Zero Trust website.
Well, thank you very much, Anne. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to working with our customers and partners to go on this zero trust journey together.